The 1100 Metal Gear Rex by Kotobukiya. I grew up playing Metal Gear Solid, and I remember fondly playing the demo over and over and over again until I eventually got my hands on a copy of the full game. I remember all the fourth wall breaking mechanics, like the codec being hidden on the back of the jewel case, and switching controller ports to defeat Psycho Mantis. I remember the presence of the Metal Gear, and I've played all of the games and enjoyed them immensely. When I found out there was a 1/100 scale model kit of the Metal Gear Rex, I knew that I had to have it. I built the kit up and was impressed with it out of the box, but I knew that I wouldn't be happy until I had that iconic camo pattern. But I was intimidated by the task of applying that camo paint pattern, and so the kit sat on my shelf unfinished until now. As with all paint jobs, I had to prep the kit for painting, and I cursed my previous self for not doing the best job with nub cleanup and sanding. Kotobukiya kits seem to be especially difficult to take apart and to do a cleanup work as compared to something like a Bandai Master Grade Gundam. This kit is especially difficult to prep because there are a few interlocking and sliding parts that are difficult to paint separately without damaging the paint job. I attempted to cut one of the leg assemblies just so that I could paint it separately and then lock it back around the peg, but it simply didn't work, and I had to fix that leg portion and paint it separately with the intention of separating an already painted part later on. Separating parts can be pretty nerve-wracking after spending so much time getting a decent paint job, so we'll see how I did later on. I cleaned all the parts with some soapy water and a toothbrush to get ready for priming. I plan to paint only the gray armor portions and leave the dark gray and light tan pieces with only a matte clear coat. I needed to do some basic masking on a few parts to keep some portions of the piece unpainted. I then primed all of the pieces with a rattle can gray primer that I've used before and seems to work well on plastic, and it's also sandable. I then painted all of the gray pieces with a base coat of 50% gray and a 50% white paint mix. And next up, the part that I was dreading, the masking. I used the reference images from the manual to plan my camo pattern. I tried to get my camo pattern to match the reference images as closely as I could, but the end result was not exact, and that's okay. My initial plan was to mask around only the areas I needed to paint and be very careful with the airbrush later on so that I didn't have to cover the whole piece in masking tape. I quickly found that I was losing track of what was supposed to be painted and what was supposed to be unpainted, so I ended up masking everything that I didn't want to paint. This whole process was as tedious and painstaking as I had imagined, and I constantly questioned my life choices. I actually had to stop halfway through and paint some of the parts that I had already masked. I used a 50% yellow olive and a 50% white paint mix. Mostly I needed to take the break from masking so that I wouldn't go insane, but also I really wanted to make sure that my masking strategy was working as I expected. When I removed my masking tape, I knew that this thing was going to look awesome, and it gave me the drive to finish. I finished up detailing some of the other pieces, and I also needed to add a yellow stripe to the railgun and the radome. From the beginning of the project, I had intended to put a brown oil wash over the entire Metal Gear Rex to help all of the different colors to mesh well together. I was a bit terrified of this step after painting all the pieces with an intricate camo pattern. I really thought it would help to unify the design though. The oil wash is using a burnt umber artist oil with a naphtha to thin it. I think you would normally use like an odorless mineral spirits, but I'm working with what I have. You'll want to wear a mask as this stuff doesn't smell great. I started off by applying a matte clear coat to all of the pieces, and next I tested the oil wash on one of the shields so that I could do a direct comparison between the oil washed shield and the unoil washed shield. And once I was done, I was very happy with the oil wash. It looked exactly how I had envisioned, and it had the added benefit of me not needing to apply the panel line accents separately, as this oil wash was doing the work to kind of make all of the colors unify and also to add all the panel lines. So I went ahead and I applied the oil wash to all of the pieces, and I followed that up with another coat of the clear matte. One of the downsides to this process, which I was not aware would happen, this oil wash, I think the naphtha in particular, it caused some of the pieces, the plastic, to become brittle and actually break. So I did have to repair some of those pieces later on, but it wasn't that bad. So in the future, I'll be a little less generous with my wash. And also, I think the wash looks a little bit more like a dirty wash, which was not the initial look that I was going for, at least in a few areas. And again, it's just me needing to be a little less heavy-handed with the wash. But overall, I was very pleased with the result. Finally, I needed to finish a few more details. So this Metal Gear needs a pilot, and it came with liquid. So I needed to paint liquid, and I did that by painting his hair blonde, his pants brown, and his boots black. And as we know, liquid is piloting that thing shirtless, so I didn't have to worry about painting a flesh tone. Lastly, I put a brown wash over top to kind of help highlight the details of the hair and his chest and arms and face. I wasn't quite sure the ratio, so I tried a few different ratios of water to paint until I got what I liked. And I also did just a straight brown paint to Liquid's eye area, and came back with the knife and just scraped in between his eyes so that you could tell differentiation between his eyes and the rest of his face. And finally, I needed to paint the base. This was a quick and dirty paint job. I did not want to detract from the Metal Gear, but I also didn't want the base to stand out as being unpainted. So what I went with is a pre-shade on all the panel lines, and I painted the whole thing in a gunmetal silver, and I added a few like hanger details which were painted in white, some like hatching and some just lines on the ground, and then just some splotches of black here and there. And finally I put a black oil wash over the whole piece and followed that up with a matte clear coat. Here's the completed project. I'm really happy with the final result of this Metal Gear Rex. I try to challenge myself in some way with every build, and this build was no exception. This was my first attempt at such a dramatic amount of masking, and it was also my first attempt at an oil wash mixed with spirits. I learned a lot from this process, and I'm really looking forward to refining that and applying it to all my future builds.